Hello, my friends. Thanks for joining us for this another week of Spiritism, a closer look on Kardec Radio. And I'm Luiz Lima, broadcasting tonight from Orlando, Florida. And tonight we are going to take a closer look at Spiritism and science. There's there are a lot of things that we can discuss. This we're going to be very specific on what we are going to address tonight. We could even say that instead of spiritism versus or and science, we could say spiritualism and science. And why do I say that? Because there's some misunderstanding, some things are apparently out of context, and we wanted to bring you the context so it makes sense to analyze what we are going to say here. So there's always this thing: spiritism and science. Who is right? Who is wrong? Are they friends? Are they foes? So, we need to contextualize so it makes sense. So, the first thing I'm going to say is this: science is currently the truth provider. What is a truth provider? A truth provider is this person, group, entity that we go to if we want to know if something is okay or not. The truth provider in the past was the church in the early, before 1859, which is when things, the truth provider changes hands. But before 1859, the church was a truth provider. So you didn't know a thing, you wanted to find out something, you would go to the church and ask them, and they would hopefully answer. But the problem is, with time, since the church took over in the early, I would say, 200s, uh, they were having less and less answers for us, especially regarding evolution. In 1859, Charles Darwin publishes his book, The Origin of the Species, where he analyzes evolution from a different perspective than the church was doing. So by changing the angle that you see the situation, the answers would change. So before Darwin, we for centuries and centuries we had questions. For example, what happens to the like a giraffe that has a huge neck? Why is that? Is that coming from something like a horse that got mutated? What was it? So the answer never came from the church. They didn't get into these things. They wanted us to, or they wanted, the population to simply submit to what they were saying, but they didn't really have the answers. So by like I would say 1700s, more or less 1750, they start to get really challenged because some people, some scientists were coming, straight in their face and asking these questions and telling them you don't know the answer. So the church was under a lot of pressure. When Darwin published his work explaining not everything, because he was the first one to say, I don't have all the answers, but I do have some. So these answers started to pop up, and these were questions that we had for centuries. So it gave him, as a scientist, this a notion that, okay, there's a new truth out there. This is what we are going to follow. So, and this is 1859 when he published his book. From then on until this day, science is considered the truth provider. Even for us spiritists, a lot of times we would say, which we are going to address a little later tonight, but we would say things like, oh, I wish that science, finds the spirit or accepts God or something like that. So why do we have to go through this? Why do they have to accept the spirit for the spirit to exist? Why does the truth provider science has to accept God for God to exist? You see, it's a little it's not well explained. So we need to put things into the proper context. I'm going to add some images here because I just think it's easier for us to follow along with some visual uh, imaging here. We know that from God, two things emanate. One is the spiritual principle, and the other is the universal cosmic fluid. What are these things? The universal cosmic fluid contains all the seeds of anything that one day, in one form or another, will become matter. These seeds are called the material principle. On the other hand, we have the spiritual principle, which is the intelligence. There is no common denominator, there is no common point between the spiritual principle and the universal cosmic fluid. Anything within the universal cosmic fluid, material principle, or matter, as we can refer easier to, this contains no intelligence. On the other hand, the spiritual principle contains no atoms, no cells, no molecules, nothing like this, no quarks. They are completely independent. The spiritual principle will learn how to interact with the universal cosmic fluid, and that's how creation comes about as a result of the interaction of these two principles, spiritual principle and material principle. The spiritual principle then starts to evolve by doing these movements of trial and error into the material principle until a point where we can use the word maybe graduate. It becomes what we call then the intelligent principle. How this happened is not the point tonight, so we are just gonna tell you. By the way, we have addressed this in the past, but for now, let's just just go ahead. So the intelligent principle continues to do the same thing. It continues the interaction with the universal cosmic fluid to build more things in the creation. The difference being things that the intelligent principle is able to build are much more advanced than the things that the spiritual principle could. And there's going to be a point where this intelligent principle gets so much better, so much more advanced, that it gets a different name, spirit. Again, how that happens is a different story. But it gets this name, spirit, which again continues interacting with the material principle to form other things that the other two levels could not do. So there's a lot of interesting things here that we need to stop and analyze. First of all, if you look at the left side of the screen, there are levels of intelligence. Some of these intelligent principles are more advanced than others. So we have different levels, different layers. If we have different layers, some are less advanced and some are more advanced. But there is the most possible advanced completely, is the supreme intelligence, which is unarguably the most advanced one. It's called the supreme intelligence. And that's God. It's interesting because that's the definition of God given to us by the spirits on the Spirits book, question number 1. If you look at the right side, that's where science is. That's the material world. What's the mechanism used by science to, because they want to get the truth, they want to understand the facts of the world. What is the mechanism? It's more or less something like this. You put your hand on top of the oven, okay, electrical oven, and you burn your hand. And you say, well, why did I burn my hand? So you need to look back. What is the cause of that? So you're going backwards one step. Oh, I found out. The oven is hot. And then you go one step back again. But why is it hot? Oh, because there's a resistance burning underneath it. Oh, okay. Then you go one step back. But why is there a resistance burning? Because there's electricity. But why? And you go back and back because you want to find the cause of everything. That's the role of science. Beautifully done, by the way. However, if you go backwards, like the exercise that we did, go back and back and back and back, there's going to be a point where, and that's the goal of science, to find the primary source of everything, the first cause of all things. So look at the beauty of this. When the spirits respond to Allan Kardec on question number 1 of the Spirit's book, what is God? The answer is, it's the supreme intelligence, the first cause of all things. So the answer addresses both. It addresses both. It addresses, visually speaking here, the left side of the screen and the right side of the screen. That's why this answer makes sense, because it's not only looking at one side and forgetting about the other, like if it didn't exist. So it's a very complete answer, and very simple, by the way. But if we don't understand exactly what first cause means, what supreme intelligence means, hopefully this is going to help you a little bit. So if we look at this on the right side here in blue, that's what science studies. They do not study anything else on the screen. They study this. How? Well, through its branches. Physics and everything that belongs to physics, thermodynamics and movement of parts, chemistry, biology, all of those, including the most recent ones, quantum mechanics, which study, by the way, if you look at a simple one phrase, short phrase definition of quantum physics, we could say that it is the study of the structure of matter. We're trying to understand how matter is composed. So a long time ago, we thought the atom was the smallest possible thing. Today, the atom is this giant thing, because now we know that it's formed by, protons, electrons, and neutrons, which are formed by smaller particles, and the names go on: bosons, hadrons, quarks, leptons, and it goes on and on and on. So that's the purpose of science, studying what happens in the material world, get to the bottom of the material principle. Now, anything else on this screen, in green here, is the object studied by Spiritism. And what do we study here? Well, things like these: about the creation, the existence of God and the spirits, the world of the spirits. We study evolution, morality, and all of these things. None of these are studied or object of study by science. They will never study the existence of God, not because they deny, because it's not their purpose. Like we spiritists, we are not going to ever go to a, say, chemistry lab to conduct experiments. No, it's not our purpose. We study morality, we study other things. So it's very clear here that there is no conflict. They are not foes, they are friends. They go hand in hand. That's why Allan Kardec, in the Spirit's book, actually, in one of the other books, in the Genesis, he's going to say that Spiritism and science complete each other. And he will go even further, saying science without Spiritism is completely unable to explain certain phenomena solely by means of the laws of matter. And Spiritism without science would lack support and control. That in itself is major. It's a simple it might seem a contradiction here, but it's not paradoxical. It's a simple mega explanation of things. Science and Spiritism are both looking for the same thing, which is to investigate, to understand, and to explain the creation, how things are, how things work, and why and how, all of those. However, if they're looking from different angles, using different criteria, like you saw on the screen, well, if the criteria is different, so will be the outcome. Take, for example, Newton. Okay, he created the laws of Newton that reigned. The entire physics is based on it. Without those laws, we wouldn't have gotten anywhere. So, thank you, Newton, for that. So, how did it all start? Newton had one question. When the apple falls on his head, he had this one question: how does the universe work? Follow my thought here. Let's say that you have this question: how does the universe work? And you go to a university and you go into the Department of Astronomy, and you go and you ask a professor, how does the universe work? What you're gonna hear is something more or less like this: oh, we have planets and satellites around the planets and moons, and we have galaxies, we have clusters and superclusters, and the planets orbit around the stars, and so and so. That's the answer. Beautiful. You take the very same questions with the very same words, and you go into a spiritist center and you ask, how does the universe work? You're not going to get a single word about the astronomy part of it. You're going to get, well, God created everything, and we have intelligent principle, and this and this and this. Well, who is wrong? Who is right? There isn't such a thing. Doesn't make sense to even ask. So Newton, during a certain period, he was accused of, not believing God. But try to understand, his question was not the religious or the spiritual part of the universe. He wanted to know how planets behave. Why do we have a moon orbiting around the Earth? Why do we have an Earth orbiting around the sun? That was his question. Nothing to do with God. So he was accused for a while of not believing in God, as an atheist. But you see, it's a matter of criteria. The difference between what we spiritists study and science is the focus. We don't focus on the same thing. They both of them, spiritism and science, they complement each other. So if you think about it, the scientific community cannot, actually, they will never be able to make a statement about the infinite power of the Creator. Not because they are not intelligent enough, they're not smart enough. No, because it is outside the scope of their work. Just like us, spiritists going to the CERN lab in Europe to see electrons colliding, we don't go there. It's for them. What we do, though, and that's the beauty of it, what we do then is we as spiritists, we use the results brought to us by science to understand what we have to understand. And what do we spiritists have to understand? Answer: the evolution of this intelligent principle. That's what we study. Now, how does the intelligent principle evolves? By acting upon a material world. So if I know from science what this intelligent principle or spirit is causing I might look back and say, oh, okay, now I know what this intelligent principle is able to do and how. So we, spiritists, we use the results of science to understand the behavior and the evolution of the intelligent principle. On the other hand, science sees us differently. They see us as displaying organized religion outside their scope of work. Yeah, absolutely, outside their scope of work. But we are not necessarily plain organized religion, not us spiritists, because organized religion is defined by four things. Four things. First, the existence of a priest or something equivalent, depends on the name. Number two, sacred book. Number three, dogmas. Number four, rituals. Well, in Spiritism, we don't have any of these four. We are not organized religion. We are not institutional or institutionalized religion. We are seeking answers on the intelligent principle side, using results obtained by science on the material science. So we do walk, we should and we do walk hand in hand with each other. Their discoveries, the scientific discoveries, they are very important for us. Yes, we need them. So all these scientific discoveries throughout time, some are very simple. For example, bacteria, and when we discovered and what we know now about bacteria and astronomy and quantum physics and thermodynamics, and it goes on and on and on. All these things help us see the consequences of the existence of the intelligent principle and understand about it. We're not asking, and we will never do this, ask science to seek, to understand that. It is outside their scope of work. We spiritists primarily study the causes of the intelligent effect. We look for the intelligent causes. We look for answers on the intelligent principle. So the expectation that some of us might have that science will one day in the future discover the spirit, discover God. No, they're not looking for this. Let them do what they have to do, and we do what we have to do. Now, science, as I stated in the beginning, being the truth provider, is where we go for the answers. But the science doesn't have all the answers. And it's not because they're not capable for it. We are still learning, all of us. We don't have all the answers for the intelligent principle. They don't have all the answers for the material principle. We're all learning, building up knowledge, helping each other. For example, science cannot explain near-death experiences. It's something that, it's been difficult for science to deal with. And we have to respect. They have to do more testing, know more. They have to study more. We can probably help with something, we spiritists. They cannot explain mediumship. They cannot understand fully magnetic fluid, its origin. They still think the origin of the magnetic fluid is in a magnet itself. And it can't be, because these are all just inert matter. So it doesn't make sense for this matter to one day just create a brain and become intelligent. That's not what it is. So they have these challenges. We have others too, ourselves, spiritists. For example, we don't have the right to citizenship in official science. We don't. We cannot tell them, this is what it is. I'm going to step in. I'm going to step in your lab and I'm going to tell you things. No. The lab is theirs. They do their stuff. We do our stuff. So, other things like illnesses, for example, certain illnesses, a lot of them, it has been identified by science in general through, especially through technology and equipment that helps, that certain illnesses have to do with not the cells. The cells are responding to something, which not necessarily they are going to tell us not yet that there's a spirit or something like that. No, but we thought it was this, but it isn't. So it's very interesting that the way we see things, it's not the same way they see things. If the criteria is different, the outcome is going to be different. So, this science versus spiritism. Are they friends or are they foes? No foe, please. We are hand in hand, helping each other, trying to get this thing everything more developed in terms of learning, so we know more, we understand more. The more we understand about the intelligent principle, the faster we make it to our destination, which is perfection. Thanks for joining us. Thanks, Rita, for being with us tonight. And don't forget, Spiritism A Closer Look is here every Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Thank you very much. We'll see you next week.